On a moonless night in rural Montana, fate orchestrates an extraordinary encounter. Jack Winters, a hard-working single father struggling to make ends meet, drives home from another exhausting night shift. Through the darkness, he spots orange flames consuming a luxury car on a deserted road. Without hesitation, he breaks through the window, pulling a mysterious woman from the wreckage moments before it explodes. As she gasps for air, her trembling hand clutches his, and 5 desperate words change both their lives forever. "Please don't let them find me." Little does Jack know that the woman he just saved is Elizabeth Montgomery, a billionaire heiress running from those who want her dead. As he offers her sanctuary on his quiet farm, an unexpected bond begins to form between these two souls from different worlds. But can love survive when deadly secrets threaten to tear them apart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old photo album sat open on Jack Winters' kitchen table, its pages worn from years of gentle touches. In the dim light of early morning, he traced his finger across a photograph of Sarah holding baby Emma, her smile as radiant as the Montana sunrise. 5 years had passed since cancer took her, but some mornings the grief felt as fresh as yesterday. The ancient coffee maker sputtered to life, its familiar gurgle a constant companion during these pre-dawn hours. Jack's muscles ached from his night shift at the lumber mill, but there would be no rest yet. The farm demanded attention, and Emma would need breakfast before school. He closed the album carefully, tucking away memories of happier times. The kitchen window offered a view of his struggling farm, 40 acres of hope and hardship wrapped in barbed wire and mortgages. The bank had been patient so far, but patience had limits, especially in times like these. "Dad?" Emma's voice drifted down the stairs, followed by the soft pad of her footsteps. At 12, she carried herself with a grace that reminded him so much of Sarah, it sometimes caught his breath. "You're home early. Morning. Sunshine." Jack poured coffee into his thermos, hiding the exhaustion behind a warm smile. "Thought we might have breakfast together before school. How about those blueberry pancakes your mum used to make?" Emma's face lit up, but her eyes held that knowing look she'd developed far too young. "You should sleep, Dad. I can make my own breakfast, and miss our pancake tradition, not a chance." He retrieved Sarah's old recipe box, its metal corners dented and worn. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't use up all the blueberries like last time." As they worked together in comfortable silence, Jack watched his daughter measure ingredients with careful precision. She'd grown up too fast after Sarah died, shouldering responsibilities no child should have to bear. The guilt of that weighed on him daily, heavier than any farm equipment he'd ever lifted. The morning sun finally crested the eastern hills, painting their small kitchen in soft gold. Emma set the table while Jack flipped the last pancake, their routine as familiar as breathing. These moments, these simple, precious moments, made the endless hours at the mill worthwhile. "Dad?" Emma's voice carried that tone that meant a serious question was coming. "Tyler's mom asked if you're dating anyone yet. She said it's been long enough." Jack's spatula paused mid-flip. "Did she now?" He kept his voice light, though something old and painful stirred in his chest. "And what did you tell Mrs. Harrison? That you're too busy taking care of me and the farm?" Emma's fork pushed a blueberry around her plate. "But would you? Date someone, I mean? If you met the right person?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken hopes and fears. Jack studied his daughter's face, seeing both the child she was and the young woman she was becoming. "The right person would have to be pretty special," he said. "Finally, they'd have to understand that you and this farm come first, always." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer, but Jack caught the slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth, the same smile Sarah used to get when she knew something he didn't. After breakfast, he watched Emma's school bus disappear down the dusty road, its yellow form growing smaller until it vanished around the bend. The morning stretched ahead of him, fence repairs in the north pasture, a broken tractor that needed attention, and bills that wouldn't pay themselves. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of stillness, remembering Sarah's words from their last good day. "Promise me you won't close your heart forever, Jack. Promise me you'll know love again when it finds you." He hadn't made that promise then, couldn't. But standing in the golden morning light, watching his daughter head off to school, Jack wondered if maybe, just maybe, Sarah had known something he didn't. Jack's worn work boots left muddy prints on the barn floor as he made his morning rounds. Every step carried the weight of generations, his father's legacy, his own dreams, and Emma's future all bound up in this patch of Montana soil. The boots themselves told a story, cracked leather patched too many times, soles worn thin from endless hours of labor, yet still holding together through sheer stubbornness. Much like everything else on the Winters farm, the morning light filtered through gaps in the weathered boards, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Inside the barn, the familiar scents of hay, leather, and earth mingled with the metallic tang of old machinery. Jack paused at the ancient tractor, its red paint faded to a dusty rose. The engine had been making an ominous clicking sound lately, another problem he couldn't afford to fix. "Morning, old girl," he muttered, patting the tractor's hood. The metal felt cool under his calloused palm. "Think you can give me one more season?" The local mechanic's words echoed in his mind. "Parts for this model are getting harder to find, Jack. Might be time to think about upgrading." As if upgrading was an option when the mortgage payment ate up every spare dollar. He moved through his morning tasks with practiced efficiency, feeding the handful of cattle they had left, checking the irrigation system for the hayfield, and assessing the fence damage from last week's storm. Each task came with its own mental calculation of cost versus necessity, a constant mathematics of survival. Mid-morning found him on his knees in the rich Montana soil, hands deep in the earth. As he worked on the irrigation pipes, the sun beat down on his neck, and his muscles protested from the night shift, but there was comfort in the work. The land didn't care about bank balances or past due notices. It asked only for sweat and dedication, giving back what you put into it. Sarah had understood this connection to the land. She'd grown up on a ranch herself, daughter of a third-generation cattle farmer. "The earth remembers those who tend it," she used to say, her hands covered in dirt from her vegetable garden. Now Emma kept that garden alive, learning the secrets of growing things just as her mother had. The sound of approaching vehicles drew Jack's attention. Through the heat waves rising from the ground, he spotted Bill Harrison's truck, followed by Tyler's mother's SUV, kicking up dust along the access road. The monthly meeting of the local agricultural cooperative was today, another reminder of the community that both supported and scrutinized their lives. "Jack," Bill's booming voice carried across the field. "Thought we might find you out here. Got a minute?" Wiping his hands on his jeans, Jack straightened up. Bill Harrison had been a friend of his father's, one of the old guard who remembered when the Winters farm was the pride of the county. These days, his visits usually meant either an offer of help Jack couldn't accept or news he didn't want to. "Here, always got time for you, Bill." Jack managed to smile, though his back screamed in protest as he walked to meet them. "What brings the co-op committee out this way?" Linda Harrison, Tyler's mother, emerged from her vehicle in clothes too pristine for a farm visit, her carefully styled hair out of place against the rustic backdrop. "Jack, we've been talking about the summer festival. The committee thinks it's time the Winters farm hosted again. It's been, 6 years? 6 years. Since Sarah. The summer festival had been her thing. She'd transformed their barn into a gathering place that drew people from 3 counties. The fairy lights she'd strung up still hung there, gathering dust. I appreciate the thought, but the whole community would help," Linda pressed, her eyes soft with what might have been pity or genuine concern. "Emma mentioned you could use some help with the repairs on the north barn. The festival fund could cover that, you know." Pride warred with practicality in Jack's chest. The north barn did need work, and the festival fund was substantial, but accepting help meant accepting scrutiny, opening their lives to the well-meaning, but gossip-prone community. It meant Linda's increasingly obvious attempts at matchmaking would have an official venue. "I'll think about it," he said finally, knowing they'd take it as a yes. In a small farming community like theirs, the festival was more than just a celebration. It was tradition, a way of keeping the old ways alive in a world that increasingly forgot about places like this. As they drove away, Jack stood watching the dust settle, thinking about Sarah's festival preparations, about Emma's face lighting up at the memories of those summer nights. Maybe it was time to let some light back into the old barn. Maybe it was time for more than just survival. But first, there was a tractor to fix, a fence to mend, and somewhere in between, he needed to find time for sleep before his next night shift. The sun climbed higher in the Montana sky, indifferent to his troubles, marking another day in a life that demanded everything and promised nothing but the satisfaction of honest work. Elizabeth Montgomery's manicured fingers traced over the corporate trust document on her father's mahogany desk, each word burning into her memory like a brand. The office still smelled of his cigars, though Richard Montgomery had been dead for barely 2 weeks. The leather chair creaked as she leaned back, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Trust your instincts, Lizzie. Numbers don't lie, but people do." The trust document told a story, one of betrayal wrapped in legal jargon and careful omissions. Column after column of transactions, each one perfectly legitimate on its surface, formed a pattern that made her blood run cold. Someone had been systematically draining the company's emergency funds, hiding the transfers behind a maze of shell corporations. "More coffee, Ms. Montgomery?" Her father's longtime secretary, Marion, appeared at the door, her face lined with concern. Elizabeth had been in the office since dawn, poring over documents most of the board thought she was too naive to understand. "No, thank you, Marion." Elizabeth smiled, though her stomach churned. "But could you tell me if Thomas is still in the building? Your brother left for lunch with Mr. Peterson an hour ago." Marion hesitated. "He asked me to remind you about the emergency. Board meeting tomorrow." Of course he had. Thomas, her beloved older brother, had been pushing for this meeting since the funeral. "Time to stabilize the company," he'd said, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Dad would want us to present a united front." But their father had left Elizabeth. "Controlling interest for a reason. Your brother's brilliant at making friends," he told her during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "But you see through people's masks. You'll need that skill more than ever when I'm gone." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office as Elizabeth photographed key documents with her phone. Each image was automatically encrypted and uploaded to a secure server. Another of her father's precautions. The corporate trust document with its damning evidence went into her briefcase. A soft knock preceded Thomas's entrance. Her brother filled the doorway in his perfectly tailored suit. Every inch the sophisticated CEO the board wanted. "Still working, sis? You should take a break. Peterson and I were just discussing tomorrow's meeting. He has some excellent suggestions for restructuring." Elizabeth met his concerned gaze, searching for any trace of the brother who had taught her to ride a bike, who had held her through their mother's funeral. "I was actually reviewing Dad's last quarter projections. Some interesting patterns in the subsidiary accounts." Something flickered behind Thomas's eyes, so brief she might have missed it if she hadn't been watching. "Don't worry about all that. The transition team will handle the details. You should focus on healing." He stepped closer, cologne masking the lingering scent of cigars. "We all want what's best for the company, for the family." Later, in her penthouse apartment, Elizabeth laid out the evidence like pieces of a puzzle. The pattern was clear now. Tomorrow's emergency meeting would be a coup. The board, led by Thomas and Peterson, would present evidence of mismanagement, force a vote of no confidence, and seize control of the company. The missing funds would never be mentioned. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father's old friend, Judge Harrison. "Got your message. Documents received. Be careful." Elizabeth's hands shook as she packed a small bag. The private investigator's words echoed in her mind. Last 3 whistleblowers in similar cases, all tragic accidents within 48 hours of going public. She changed into dark clothes, transferred funds to secure accounts, and deleted her social media. The elevator to the private garage felt like a cage, each floor bringing her closer to a decision that would change everything. Her Mercedes, too conspicuous. Instead, she took the nondescript hybrid her father had insisted she keep for emergencies. The garage was empty at this hour, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls as she hurried to the car. The city lights blurred as she drove, her mind racing through contingency plans. The evidence was secure, the judge would keep it safe, but she needed time. Time to build a case, time to understand the full scope of the conspiracy, time she wouldn't have if she stayed. Thunder rolled across the Montana sky as she left the city behind, rain beginning to fall. In her rearview mirror, headlights appeared, probably nothing, but her pulse quickened anyway. Her father's voice came to her again. "When in doubt, head for open country. Cities have too many cameras, too many ways to trap you." The headlights grew closer. Elizabeth pressed the accelerator, rain drumming harder on the roof. She was so focused on the approaching lights that she almost missed the oil slick on the curve ahead. The car spun, tires fighting for grip on wet asphalt. The last thing she saw was the guardrail giving way, and then the world became fire and twisted metal. Through the flames and pain she heard footsteps approaching, not the measured steps of her pursuers, but the urgent rhythm of salvation. As strong hands pulled her from the wreckage, she glimpsed honest eyes in a weathered face. Her last conscious thought was a prayer that she'd found someone she could trust. Her life, and perhaps her father's legacy, depended on it. Dawn crept through handmade curtains, casting gentle light across the patchwork quilt covering Elizabeth Montgomery. For a moment she lay still, her body aching, trying to reconcile the unfamiliar surroundings with her last memories of fire and fear. The quilt smelled of lavender and sunshine, so different from the antiseptic sterility of her penthouse linens. "Gran made that quilt for Mom when she got sick," a young voice said from the doorway. Elizabeth turned carefully to see Emma standing there, already dressed for school, holding a steaming mug. "Dad said you might like some tea. It's chamomile, good for healing," Mom always said. The girl's matter-of-fact kindness brought unexpected tears to Elizabeth's eyes. "Thank you, Emma." She accepted the mug with bandaged hands, noting the careful way the child watched her movements. "Did your grandmother teach you about healing herbs?" "Mom did. She had a whole garden of them." Emma perched on the edge of the bed, smoothing the quilt with practiced hands. "Dad says you can stay as long as you need to. He called in sick to the mill today. First time ever." Guilt twisted in Elizabeth's stomach. This family had so little, yet they offered what they had without hesitation. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Emma said firmly, sounding older than her years. "Dad says helping people is what makes us human. Besides, you look like you could use a friend." The sound of boots on wooden stairs preceded Jack's appearance. He filled the doorway in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, his presence somehow both commanding and gentle. "Emma, bus'll be here soon." "Got your homework?" "Just finishing my tea delivery." Emma grinned, standing. She hesitated, then impulsively hugged Elizabeth. "Feel better, okay? Maybe later I can show you my herb garden." After Emma left, Jack lingered, his weathered face showing concern. "Dr. Stevens will stop by this afternoon. Small town. He makes house calls, and he's discreet. How's the pain?" "Manageable." Elizabeth sipped the tea, using the moment to study her rescuer in daylight. His eyes were kind but shrewd, missing nothing. "Mr. Winters—" "Jack," he corrected softly. "Jack. I know you must have questions." He pulled up the old rocking chair, its joints creaking like a familiar conversation. "Only one that matters right now. Are you in danger?" The directness of his question, the quiet strength behind it, made her pause. In her world, questions always had angles, hidden meanings. But Jack Winters asked straight out, ready to face whatever answer came. "Yes," she admitted finally, "and by helping me you could be too. I should leave. Folks who aren't in danger don't usually end up in burning cars on back roads." His voice held no judgment, just calm certainty. "Whatever's chasing you, you'll heal better knowing you're safe. We've got good neighbors out here, and they know how to mind their own business." A rooster crowed outside, and Jack stood, automatically checking his watch. "Need to feed the cattle. Rest today. Emma left some books on the nightstand if you get bored. And Miss Montgomery—" "Elizabeth," she offered, matching his earlier correction. A slight smile touched his lips. "Elizabeth, whatever you're running from, sometimes the best place to hide is somewhere they'd never think to look." Throughout the day, Elizabeth drifted between sleep and waking, her body demanding rest while her mind spun with possibilities. She watched through the window as Jack worked, moving with the efficient grace of someone who knew every inch of his land. The farm wasn't grand by any means, but there was a dignity in its well-maintained fences and carefully tended fields. Dr. Stevens arrived in the afternoon, his ancient pickup raising dust on the drive. He reminded her of her father's old hunting. Friends, direct, competent, and unimpressed by pretense. He checked her injuries, replaced bandages, and asked no questions about how she'd gotten them. "Winters is good people," he said as he packed up his bag. "Known him since he was born. If he's offering you sanctuary, you won't find better." Evening brought Emma home from school, bursting with stories and questions she tried to contain out of consideration for their patient. She sat cross-legged on the floor, near Elizabeth's bed, sorting through her backpack. "We're studying local history," she explained, pulling out a textbook. "Did you know this valley used to hide people escaping from all sorts of things? Dad says the land keeps its own secrets." The afternoon sun slanted golden through the windows, catching the dust motes in its beam. From somewhere outside came the rhythmic sound of chopping wood, punctuated by the distant lowing of cattle. Elizabeth found herself relaxing into the peaceful cadence of farm life, her racing thoughts finally slowing. Later, Jack brought up a tray with soup and fresh bread. The simple meal tasted better than any five-star restaurant she could remember. "Emma's right about the valley," he said, helping her sit up against the pillows. "Whatever brought you here, you're not the first person these hills have hidden. Take the time you need to heal. The rest will sort itself out." As darkness fell, Elizabeth lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar night sounds of the countryside. The quilt wrapped around her like a grandmother's embrace, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something close to peace. In running from those who would destroy her, she'd found herself in a place where time moved differently, where worth was measured not in dollars, but in the strength of helping hands and the warmth of quilts made with love. Elizabeth stared at her designer boots, now caked with mud and manure, and couldn't help but laugh. A week ago, these Italian leather treasures had clicked importantly across marble lobbies. Now they served a different purpose entirely, marking a transformation from corporate heiress to reluctant farmhand. "Something funny about those fence posts?" Jack's voice carried across the morning air, tinged with amusement. He'd been teaching her basic farm tasks, partly to maintain her cover story as a distant cousin helping out, and partly, she suspected, because idle hands made him nervous. Just admiring my new fashion statement. She gestured at her mud-covered self. If the board could see me now. Jack leaned against the fence, his presence solid and reassuring. You're getting the hang of it. Most city folks can't tell a post digger from a hayfork their first week. The praise warmed her more than it should have. She'd spent years in boardrooms commanding billion-dollar decisions, yet Jack's simple appreciation of her efforts meant something different entirely. I had a good teacher, she replied, then winced as her blistered hands protested around the post digger. Here, he said, moving closer. You're gripping too tight. Let the tool do the work. His calloused hands covered hers, adjusting her grip. The contact sent an unexpected shiver through her that had nothing to do with the morning chill. A truck rumbled past on the distant road, making them both tense. But it drove on, leaving only dust and paranoid memories. These moments happened several times a day. Sudden noises, unexpected vehicles, shadows that seemed to move wrong. Each time, Jack would casually position himself between Elizabeth and potential danger, his protective instinct as natural as breathing. Emma's got her heart set on showing you her herb garden after school, he said, deliberately casual. She hasn't been this excited about it since Sarah, he trailed off. Pain, flickering across his features. Elizabeth focused on the fence post, giving him space to recover. She'd learned to read these moments when memories of his late wife surfaced like sudden storms. She's a remarkable girl. You've raised her well, sometimes I wonder. Jack drove his own post digger into the earth with practiced ease. She grew, up too fast after Sarah died, took on too much. Having you here, she's acting her age again. It's good to hear her laugh. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of valley fog. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into a rhythm that felt somehow familiar. Elizabeth found herself watching Jack when he wasn't looking. The sure movement of his hands, the quiet strength in his shoulders, the way the sun caught the silver threading through his dark hair. You know, he said suddenly, Emma asked me something interesting yesterday. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. She wanted to know if you were hiding from bad people, or if you were one of the bad people yourself. Elizabeth's heart stumbled. What did you tell her? Told her that sometimes good people have to hide from bad situations, and that I trust my gut. He turned to face her fully. My gut's never been wrong about people, Elizabeth. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're protecting, I believe you're on the right side of it. Tears pricked at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. In her world, trust was a commodity to be traded, not freely given. Your gut tell you anything else about me? Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her breath catch. But before he could answer, a chorus of barking erupted from the nearest farmhouse. They both froze, watching a black SUV cruise slowly past the property. Jack moved with casual purpose, blocking Elizabeth from view behind the fence post stack. The vehicle continued down the road, but the moment had shattered. Like fine crystal, we should head back, he said, gathering their tools. Storm's coming anyway. Indeed, dark clouds were building over the mountains, promising afternoon rain. As they walked back to the farmhouse, Elizabeth found herself studying her ruined boots again. They represented everything she'd left behind: privilege, power, certainty. Yet somehow, covered in honest Montana mud, they felt more authentic than they ever had on polished floors. The distant rumble of thunder followed them home. Emma would be back from school soon, eager to share her garden and her stories. There would be a simple dinner, comfortable conversation, and moments when Elizabeth almost forgot she was hiding for her life, almost forgot that she didn't belong in this world of fence posts and family meals. But belonging, she was learning, had little to do with where you came from. It had everything to do with where you found your heart coming to rest. And despite every rational argument against it, despite the danger she'd brought to their door, Elizabeth Montgomery's expensively educated heart was learning the simple language of farm life and the even simpler language of falling in love. The farm's account books spread across the kitchen table like a paper maze, their coffee-stained pages telling a story Elizabeth had learned to read all too well. Jack stood at the window, shoulders tense, while she ran calculations on her phones. In Calculator, her one concession to modern technology since going into hiding. So that's why the feed costs spike every quarter, she muttered, tracing a pattern in the numbers. Jack, who's your supplier? Peterson Agricultural Supply. Been using them since my father's time. He turned from the window, his expression guarded. Why? Elizabeth bit back a bitter laugh at the familiar name. Peterson, always Peterson, his tentacles reaching even here. They're overcharging you. These delivery fees are nearly double the regional average, and these fuel surcharges... She shook her head, silver-streaked dark hair falling across her face. There are at least 3 local suppliers who could do better. Jack moved closer, studying the numbers she'd circled. His proximity sent a now familiar warmth through her chest, one she couldn't afford to acknowledge. Changing suppliers isn't simple out here. Relationships matter. So do margins. Elizabeth pulled out a fresh piece of paper, beginning to sketch a basic flowchart. Look, if you restructured your ordering schedule and partnered with the Harrison farm for bulk purchases. Her hand moved swiftly, years of business strategy flowing onto the page. Emma wandered in from her homework, drawn by their intense discussion. Dad, is Elizabeth fixing our money problems? Jack's face softened as he looked at his daughter. She's trying to help us understand them better, Sunshine. Actually, Elizabeth smiled at Emma, I'm learning too. Your dad's taught me more about real-world economics this week than my entire MBA program. It was true. The complex dance of small farm survival made corporate finance look almost simple in comparison. The kitchen filled with the smell of Emma's attempt at chocolate chip cookies, slightly burnt, but made with love. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, drumming on the tin roof like nature's own accounting department, tallying up its resources. Here, Elizabeth pointed to a particular set of figures. You're actually losing money on the hay operation when you factor in equipment maintenance. But if you converted that south field to organic produce... She stopped, suddenly aware she might be overstepping. But Jack was looking at her with something new in his eyes. Respect mingled with curiosity. Go on, he said softly. I'm listening. She outlined her idea, watching his expression shift from skepticism to consideration. The local organic market was underserved, and with Emma's herb garden already thriving, the numbers danced in her. It had not as cold statistics, but as possibilities as hope. We'd need startup capital, Jack mused, running a hand through his hair. Banks aren't exactly throwing money at small farms these days. Elizabeth's fingers itched to reach for her phone to access one of her hidden accounts. She could solve their financial problems with a single transfer, but that would raise too many questions, create too many paper trails. Besides, she suspected Jack Winters was the kind of man who needed to save himself. There are agricultural grants, she offered instead. I could help with the applications. Your soil composition is perfect for organic certification, and with Emma's knowledge of herbs, could we grow lavender? Emma piped up, pulling her slightly scorched cookies from the oven. Like in Mom's garden. A shadow crossed Jack's face at the mention of Sarah, but it passed quickly. Your mother always said that land would tell you what it needed to grow, if you listened carefully enough. She was right, Elizabeth said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. This farm has good bones, Jack. It just needs optimization. He laughed then, a rich sound that filled the kitchen. Optimization? That what they call it in business school? Among other things. She smiled, allowing herself to enjoy the moment of connection. Think of it as helping the land keep its promises. The rain intensified outside, but in the warm kitchen, surrounded by papers and possibilities, Elizabeth felt more centered than she had in weeks. Here, helping this family find their way forward, she wasn't the Montgomery heiress or the corporate whistleblower. She was just Elizabeth, a woman with skills to share and a heart that grew more invested with each passing day. Emma set a plate of imperfect cookies between them, and they bent their heads together over the books again. As they worked, Elizabeth caught Jack watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. In his eyes, she saw something dangerous. Not the threat of discovery or corporate revenge, but the far more terrifying possibility of finding exactly where she belonged. The account books told their story of struggle and persistence, but between the lines, another story was being written. One that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with the way Jack's hand brushed hers as they reached for the same paper. The way Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of expanding her garden. The way this kitchen felt more like home than her penthouse ever had. Outside, another vehicle drove past, slow and deliberate, but for once Elizabeth didn't flinch. She was too absorbed in the simple miracle of belonging, even if only for a moment, even if it couldn't last. The old recipe book lay open on the counter, its pages yellow with age and spotted with generations of cooking adventures. Elizabeth ran her finger along Sarah's handwritten notes in the margins of the pot roast recipe. Extra carrots for Jack, and don't forget fresh thyme from garden. Such small details, such intimate knowledge of the people you love. Mum always said recipes are like love letters, Emma explained, carefully measuring herbs from her garden. You can tell how much someone cares by the little notes they leave behind. She sprinkled thyme into the pot with the same precision she applied to her schoolwork. See here, she wrote, cooking time varies with mood of ancient oven. Elizabeth smiled, watching the girl navigate the kitchen with quiet confidence. After 3 weeks at the farm, these evening cooking sessions had become a cherished ritual. Your mother sounds like she was very wise. She was. Emma's voice held pride rather than sadness. Dad says I have her way with growing things, and her terrible handwriting. The screen door creaked, and Jack stepped in from the evening chores, bringing with him the scent of hay and coming rain. He paused in the doorway, something soft crossing his face as he watched them cooking together. Elizabeth felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. Something smells good, he said, moving to wash up at the sink. Sarah's pot roast. Elizabeth found the recipe. Emma beamed. And I picked fresh herbs, just like Mum used to. The domestic intimacy of the moment caught in Elizabeth's throat. In her other life, dinner had been business meetings or hastily ordered luxury takeout. Here, in this farmhouse kitchen, food was an expression of care, of belonging. Thunder rumbled. In the distance, as they sat down to eat, the old oak table bore the marks of countless family meals, homework sessions, early morning coffees, late-night conversations. Elizabeth's place setting, she realized, had somehow become as familiar as Jack's or Emma's. "Tell me about the day. You met Mom?" Emma said suddenly, passing the breadbasket to her father. It wasn't asked with sadness, but with the comfortable curiosity of a child who had made peace with her loss. Jack's eyes met Elizabeth's briefly before turning to his daughter. "Well, I was fixing a fence on the Harrison property. Not much different from what Elizabeth and I were doing yesterday." His voice took on the cadence of a familiar story. "Your mum came riding up on that spotted mare of hers, took one look at my crooked fence posts and said, 'If you're going to do a job, cowboy, at least do it straight.'" Emma finished with him giggling. "And then she showed you how." "That she did." Jack smiled at the memory. "Your mother never let me get away with halfway work. She'd have approved of Elizabeth's business improvements, I think. Sarah always said this farm could be more than it was." Elizabeth's heart stuttered at being included in this intimate family moment. "She sounds remarkable." "She was," Jack said softly, "and she'd be proud of how Emma's keeping her garden alive." Outside, the storm drew closer, lightning illuminating the kitchen in brief, bright flashes. The pot roast had turned out perfectly, the meat tender and fragrant with herbs. Elizabeth watched Emma sop up gravy with a piece of bread, so at ease with their unexpected guest-turned family member. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Elizabeth her mother's collection of pressed flowers, preserved between the pages of an old dictionary. Each dried bloom came with a story, a memory Emma shared with the generous spirit of a child who had learned that joy and sadness could coexist. The storm finally broke in earnest, rain drumming against the windows. Emma fell asleep on the couch, her head resting against Elizabeth's shoulder. Jack watched them from his armchair, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "I should get her to bed," he said finally, standing. He lifted Emma with practiced gentleness, the girl barely stirring as he carried her upstairs. Elizabeth moved to the window, watching lightning sketch white-hot paths across the Montana sky. She heard Jack's quiet footsteps returning, felt him stop behind her. "Thank you," he said softly. She turned. "For what?" "For helping her remember the good things, for making this house feel like—" He trailed off, moving closer. The thunder crashed, but Elizabeth barely heard it. Jack was looking at her the way he looked at his land, like something precious, something worth protecting. His hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her face, the touch sending electricity through her that had nothing to do with the storm. For a moment, the world narrowed to this: the warmth of his palm against her cheek, the sound of rain on the roof, the way his eyes asked a question his voice hadn't formed. Elizabeth leaned forward slightly, her heart pounding. A car door slammed somewhere. On the road, the sound sharp enough to break the spell. They stepped apart, the moment scattered like the pressed flower petals in Sarah's dictionary. "I should—" Elizabeth gestured vaguely upstairs. "Yeah." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "Early morning tomorrow." But as she climbed the stairs to her room, Elizabeth knew something had shifted. Like Sarah's margin notes in the recipe book, some things couldn't be unwritten once they were acknowledged. The question was whether she had the right to write. Her own story here, knowing the dangers that followed her, could tear these precious pages apart. The USB drive felt heavy in Elizabeth's hand as she sat at the farmhouse's ancient desktop computer, the pre-dawn darkness pressing against the windows. She hadn't touched the evidence since arriving at the farm, too afraid of leaving digital footprints. But Judge Harrison's encrypted email had been clear. They're closing in, time running out. The computer hummed to life, its fan whirring like a tired confession. Elizabeth glanced toward the stairs, ensuring the house remained quiet. Jack's night shift at the mill would end soon, and Emma was still asleep, just enough time to check the financial records, to see how close Thomas and Peterson had come to tracking her. Her hands froze over the keyboard as voices drifted through the open window, the early morning news playing from old Mrs. Jensen's house next door. Still no sign of Elizabeth Montgomery, the missing CEO of Montgomery Industries. Sources close to the family suggest foul play may be involved in her disappearance. Her brother, Thomas Montgomery, has offered a substantial reward. The sound of Jack's truck in the driveway sent her heart racing. She quickly ejected the USB drive, but not before the screen filled with damning headlines. Montgomery heiress missing, billion-dollar empire in crisis. Thomas Montgomery takes emergency control. Elizabeth? Jack's voice, usually so welcome, now carried the weight of discovery. He stood in the doorway, still in his work clothes, holding his phone. On its screen was her corporate portrait, the Elizabeth Montgomery of 3 months ago. Polished, powerful, unafraid. Care to explain this? She turned slowly, seeing the hurt and confusion in his eyes. Jack, Dad? Emma appeared on the stairs, tablet in hand. Is Elizabeth really a billionaire? It's all over social media. Tyler just sent me. Emma, go to your room. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. But Dad, please, honey, just give us a minute. Emma retreated, but not before giving Elizabeth a look of betrayal that cut deeper than any corporate knife. The silence that followed felt like a living thing, consuming all the trust they'd built. Everything else, Jack said finally, moving into the room. Everything else you told us. Was any of it real? All of it. Elizabeth stood, fighting to keep her voice steady. The danger is real. The people after me are real. I just couldn't. Tell you? Couldn't tell me what? That you're not some distant cousin hiding from an abusive ex? That you're actually one of the richest women in the country? His laugh held no humor. Do you know what this could do to Emma, to the farm? If they find you here, they'll destroy everything. Elizabeth moved toward him, needing him to understand. My brother Peterson, they've already killed to keep their secrets. The evidence on this drive, she held up the USB. It proves they've been embezzling billions, using the company to fund criminal enterprises. My father discovered it before. He died. That's why they want me dead. Jack took the drive, turning it over in his weathered hands. The same hands that had pulled her from the burning car, that had taught her to mend fences, that had almost caressed her face during last night's storm. Why us? Why here? I didn't choose this place. Her voice softened. But staying, that was because of you. Both of you. For the first time in my life, I found somewhere I didn't have to pretend. A notification pinged on Jack's phone. Another. News alert. His face hardened as he read it. They're saying you embezzled the money, that you're mentally unstable, dangerous. He looked up, and the doubt in his eyes broke something in her chest. What am I supposed to believe? Believe what you've seen, she whispered. These past months, that's who I really am. Not the corporate photo, not the news stories. The woman who helped with the farm accounts, who learned to feed chickens, she swallowed hard, who fell in love with this place, with this life, with... Tires crunched on gravel outside. They both froze, moving to the window. A black SUV had parked at the end of the drive, 2 men in suits emerging. Even at this distance, Elizabeth recognized Peterson's head of security. Backstairs, Jack said instantly, his protective instincts overriding any doubt. There's a crawl space in the barn, behind the old hay baler. Go now. Jack, we'll figure this out. His hand caught her arm as she passed. But you have to trust me, like I trusted you. The sound of Emma's footsteps overhead reminded them of what was at stake. Elizabeth clutched the USB drive, wondering if it was worth the cost. One look at Jack's face, determined, honorable, everything her world wasn't, told her it had to be. She slipped out the back just as a heavy knock echoed from the front door. The last thing she heard was Jack's voice, calm and steady. Can I help you, gentlemen? Little early for social calls. The morning sun was rising over the mountains as Elizabeth ran toward the barn, casting long shadows across the farmyard. Somewhere in the house, her 2 worlds were about to collide, and she couldn't be sure anything would survive the impact. Jack's fingers brushed the Army Ranger badge in his pocket, a habit from another life, one he'd left behind when Sarah got sick. The 2 men in his kitchen carried themselves with the artificial casualness of trained operators. They're expensive. Suits couldn't hide the bulges of shoulder holsters from eyes that had once specialized in spotting such things. Mr. Winters, the taller one said, we're investigating the disappearance of Elizabeth Montgomery, routine canvass of the area. He placed a photo on the kitchen table. Elizabeth in corporate armor, her smile professional but empty. Nothing. Like the real smile Jack had come to know, the one that appeared when Emma showed her new herbs or when the morning sun hit the fields just right. Pretty far off the beaten path for a corporate investigation, Jack observed, keeping his voice neutral. Through the window, he could see Emma on the front porch watching. Smart girl, she'd positioned herself where she could see but not be seen, just as he'd taught her. Miss Montgomery's brother is very concerned. The second man spoke with the oily smoothness Jack remembered from interrogation training. She was unstable before she disappeared, possibly dangerous. Jack's hand tightened on his coffee mug, remembering Elizabeth's gentle patience with Emma, her careful tending of Sarah's garden. That's so. We have reason to believe she may be in this area. The first man leaned forward slightly. The reward for information is substantial, enough to save a struggling farm, perhaps. The badge in Jack's pocket seemed to grow heavier. 15 years since he'd led a special operations team. Since he'd been the kind of man these visitors would think twice about threatening. He'd buried that part of himself when he'd chosen family over duty, trading combat zones for crop rotation. But some skills never fade. Mind if we look around? The second man was already standing, his hand casually near his concealed weapon. Simple welfare check. Wouldn't want any dangerous fugitives hiding in the area. Jack set his mug down carefully. Actually, I do mind. His voice changed subtly, shed its farmer's drawl. And unless you have a warrant, we're done here. Something shifted in the men's posture, recognition, perhaps, of the predator they'd mistaken for prey. The taller one reached slowly into his jacket. That would be unwise, Jack said softly. My daughter's watching from the porch, phone in hand. One wrong move, and this becomes a very official incident. I'm sure Mr. Peterson would prefer to avoid police involvement. They hadn't mentioned Peterson's name. The slip made both men tense. You seem well informed for a simple farmer, the oily one said, and you seem underprepared for professionals. Jack smiled without warmth. Your surveillance missed a lot, like the fact that every neighbor within 5 miles has been watching. Your vehicle since you turned off the highway. Small communities look after their own. As if on cue, Bill Harrison's truck rumbled past, slowing deliberately. 2 more vehicles appeared on the access road, their drivers familiar faces from the agricultural cooperative. Here's what's going to happen, Jack continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded elite teams. You're going to leave. You're going to tell your employer that Elizabeth Montgomery isn't here, and you're going to suggest that searching private property without warrants might attract unwanted attention. You're making a mistake, the tall one warned. If you're hiding her, the only mistake, Jack cut in, was thinking I was just another desperate farmer you could intimidate. The next visitor better have a warrant and a better class of operative. The threat hung in the air between them, clear but carefully legal. Both men glanced at the growing number of vehicles visible through the window, at the watching neighbors who formed a silent ring of protection. We'll be in touch, the oily one said finally. No, Jack replied. You won't. He watched them leave, noting their license plate out of habit. Emma slipped inside as the SUV disappeared down the road, her face a mix of fear and fierce pride. Dad, she touched the hand that still gripped his coffee mug. Are you really just a farmer? Jack pulled the badge from his pocket, its surface worn smooth by years of worry. I'm your father. That's what matters. He looked toward the barn where Elizabeth was hiding. But sometimes being a father means being other things too. Are we going to help her? Emma's voice held no doubt, only determination. She's family now, isn't she? Even if she didn't tell us everything. Jack studied his daughter's face, seeing Sarah's strength there. Family, he said slowly, is complicated. But yes, we're going to help her. Because it's right. And because you love her, Emma finished simply. I've seen how you look at her when you think no one's watching. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the kitchen where they'd shared so many meals, so many moments of quiet joy. Jack touched his badge one last time before slipping it back into his pocket. Go feed the chickens, he told Emma, and then start packing a bag, just like we practiced. She nodded, understanding. They'd had a bug-out plan since Sarah died, another habit he'd never quite shed. Now, watching his daughter move with calm purpose, Jack felt the old tactical mindset returning. He'd kept his combat skills carefully boxed away, but for Elizabeth, for his family, it was time to become the man he used to be, the man who knew how to fight back. The security camera feeds flickered across the old laptop screen, showing 4 different views of the farm's perimeter. Elizabeth watched Jack check them methodically, his movements precise and practiced. In the 3 hours since Peterson's men had left, he'd transformed their home into a tactical operations center with the efficiency that both impressed and unsettled her. Military-grade cameras, she observed, recognizing the quality of the infrared imaging. Not standard farm equipment, Sarah insisted. Jack replied, adjusting one of the feeds. After we lost the south pasture to rustlers, told her it was excessive, but, he glanced at her, my wife had a way of seeing ahead. They were in the barn's hidden office, a space Elizabeth hadn't known existed until today. Monitors lined one wall, weapons safely locked in a gun safe on another. A go-bag sat ready by the door. Everything spoke of careful preparation, of a man who had never fully left his combat training behind. 4 more vehicles just turned onto Old Mill Road. Emma reported from her position at the window. She handled the binoculars with familiar ease, no trace of fear in her voice. 2 black SUVs, 1 sedan, 1 pickup, moving slow like before. Elizabeth's chest tightened. I should leave. You've already risked too much. No! Jack's response was immediate, final. Running is what they expect. It's what they want. He turned to face her fully. But before this goes further, I need the whole truth. Not the corporate heiress version, not the fugitive version, the real story. Emma lowered her binoculars, equally intent. They deserved honesty, these 2 who had given her sanctuary, who had shown her what family could mean. The USB drive contains proof of a decades-long conspiracy, Elizabeth began. Peterson's company isn't just a supplier. It's a front. They've been using Montgomery Industries to launder money for years, hiding it in agricultural supply chains. Across the country, my father discovered it just before his heart attack. The bitterness in her voice made Emma flinch. Thomas, my brother, he's been part of it from the beginning. When I found the evidence, I became a liability. And the accident that brought you here? Jack's eyes were shrewd. Was no accident. They thought they'd finished the job, but, she smiled grimly, Father insisted all his children learn defensive driving, another precaution that seemed excessive at the time. A quiet beep from the security system interrupted them. Jack moved to the monitors, his expression hardening. They're not even trying to hide now. 8 men, armed, spreading out along the tree line. Dad? Emma's voice carried a tremor for the first time. Mrs. Harrison's lights just went on. And Mr. Jensen's. Jack nodded, unsurprised. Community alert system, old-fashioned but effective. He reached for his phone, sending a quick text. Bill's rallying the co-op members. No one comes after one of ours without answering to all of us. Ours, Elizabeth whispered. His eyes met hers, soft despite the tension surrounding them. You stopped being a stranger the day you helped Emma plant Sarah's lavender, he checked. The monitors again. Besides, Peterson's operation threatens every farm in the valley. This was always going to be our fight, too. Headlights appeared on the main road, but these were familiar. Farmers' trucks and ranch vehicles positioning themselves strategically around the property. The community's response brought unexpected tears to Elizabeth's eyes. In the corporate world, alliances lasted only as long as profit margins allowed. This was something else entirely. Movement at the south fence, Emma reported suddenly. They're cutting through. Jack's phone buzzed. Bill's people are in position. Sheriff's been notified unofficially. He turned to Elizabeth. Last chance. This gets ugly from here. She straightened, feeling the weight of the USB drive in her pocket. I won't run anymore. Whatever happens, we face it together. A shot rang out, a warning fired into the air. Her voice carried across the darkened farm. Montgomery, we just want to talk. Yeah, Jack muttered, checking the gun safe's combination lock. That's not happening. He looked at Emma, their practiced protocol passing unspoken between them. She nodded and moved to the hidden storage space, already knowing her role. Elizabeth watched father and daughter work in seamless coordination, years of preparation becoming reality. I never meant to bring war to your door. War was already here, Jack replied, his voice gentle despite his focused movements. Been here since corporations like Peterson started choking the life out of family farms. You just gave us a chance to fight back. Through the cameras, they watched Peterson's men advance through the darkness, unaware that every movement was observed, not just by Jack's security system, but by dozens of watchful neighbors, urban operators used to working in concrete canyons, missing the subtle signs of rural resistance. Dad? Emma's voice was steady again. Remember what Mom always said about bullies? A rare smile crossed Jack's face. That they never expect the sheep to bite back. He checked the monitors one final time. Well, they're about to learn what happens when they threaten the wrong flock. The night air thrummed with tension, but in that hidden room, surrounded by technology and trust, Elizabeth finally understood what she'd been running toward all along. Not just safety, but belonging. Not just protection, but purpose. Another shot split the darkness. The war for Montgomery Industries was about to become a battle for the heart of a community. And for the first time since her father's death, Elizabeth knew exactly which side she was on. The company ledger glowed on the laptop screen, its columns of numbers telling a story of betrayal in clean, precise digits. Elizabeth's fingers flew across the keyboard while Jack's voice crackled over the radio, coordinating with their neighbors. They were in the farm's hidden bunker now, a storm shelter Jack had built that felt suspiciously well equipped for situations exactly like this. Eastern fence breach contained, Bill Harrison's voice reported through the static. Jensen's boys got 3 of them tangled up in the old barbed wire. Real shame about that missing warning sign. Emma monitored the security feeds, her young face illuminated by the screens. Mrs. Harrison's group has their vehicles blocked in. She's talking to them about property rights, very loudly. Elizabeth smiled despite the tension. Linda Harrison, so concerned with social propriety, now leading a blockade of farming equipment against corporate intrusion. The ledger's numbers continued to scroll as her emergency codes accessed deeper levels of the Montgomery Industries network. Got it, she breathed, finding the hidden accounts. Thomas, you arrogant fool. You didn't even change Father's override protocols. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Jack, it's ready. Once I execute this, there's no going back. Jack appeared behind her, still wearing his tactical gear, another surprise from his past life. Your call, but whatever you decide, we've got your back. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the monitors. Someone trying to breach the farmhouse. Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. This was her moment, her decision. Elizabeth thought of her father's last words. The company's not just numbers, Lizzie. It's people, communities. Never forget that. She pressed enter to cross the country, emergency protocols activated. Every transaction Peterson's network had hidden over the past decade began uploading to federal regulators. Every shell company, every fraudulent supply contract, every piece of evidence her father had discovered, and she had verified, all of it pouring into the light. Multiple vehicles approaching from the highway, Emma reported. But these are different. Black sedans, government plates. FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, Elizabeth explained, watching confirmation emails flood her secure account. Judge Harrison's been keeping them updated. They were just waiting for evidence that couldn't be buried. A new voice blared through the night, amplified and official. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The property is surrounded. All armed individuals are ordered to stand down immediately. The security feeds showed Peterson's men freezing, caught between corporate enforcers and federal agents. In the confusion, local farmers melted away into the darkness, years of hunting experience serving them well. Dad, Emma's voice held a note of concern. There's movement in the north field. Someone's running for the old logging road. Jack studied the infrared feed. Peterson's head of security. Man knows when a ship is sinking. He checked his weapon, an old habit. He'll have a backup vehicle stashed. He also has a copy of the evidence, Elizabeth added. Dead man's switch. Insurance against Thomas turning on him. She met Jack's eyes. We can't let him leave. For a moment, she saw the tactical commander he must have been, analyzing angles and options. Then he smiled. The warm, quiet smile she'd fallen in love with. Emma, show Elizabeth the tunnel entrance, the one that comes up behind the old oak tree. Emma nodded, understanding instantly. Mom's escape route, for when the storms get bad. I'll handle our friend. Jack moved toward the bunker's back exit. You two be ready with the evidence when the FBI starts asking questions. Jack, Elizabeth caught his arm. Be careful. These men, they've killed before. His hand covered hers, calloused and warm. Yeah, well, so have I. Different cause, better reasons. He glanced at Emma, then back to Elizabeth. Besides, I've got something worth fighting for. The moment held between them. All the unspoken feelings, rising to the surface. Then Emma cleared her throat. Guys, bad guy getting away, federal agents everywhere. Maybe save the romantic stuff for later. Jack chuckled, squeezing Elizabeth's hand once before letting go. Smart kid. Wonder where she gets that from. Sarah, they said together, and the shared memory was a comfort rather than a pain. As Jack disappeared into the tunnel, Elizabeth turned back to the laptop. The company ledger continued to spill its secrets, each revelation another nail in Peterson's coffin. Outside, federal agents were securing the farm, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searching fingers. Emma settled beside her, shoulder touching shoulder, in quiet support. We're going to be okay, aren't we? All of us? Elizabeth wrapped an arm around the girl who had somehow become as dear as family. Your dad's out there, and he's got the whole community watching his back, she smiled. Besides, I think it's time Peterson learned what happens when you threaten a family that knows how to fight back. Through the monitors, they watched the FBI begin to restore order to their little corner of Montana. But Elizabeth's attention stayed on the north field, where somewhere in the darkness, the man she loved was proving that a farmer could be a warrior too, especially when protecting his own. The childhood photograph trembled in Elizabeth's hands. Her and Thomas at their family's Montana ranch, both grinning, his arm protective around his little sister. They couldn't have been more than 12 and 8, their faces sun-browned and happy, before money and power had poisoned everything, before their father's death had revealed the rot at their family's core. "He's here," Emma called from her lookout position. Outside, a helicopter's rotors chopped through the dawn air, drowning. Out the FBI agent still processing Peterson's captured men. "Looks like he came alone." Jack appeared at Elizabeth's shoulder, still wearing his tactical gear from the night's operation. The head of security was now in federal custody, along with the evidence he'd tried to destroy. But Thomas was different. "You don't have to face him," Jack said softly. Elizabeth tucked the photo into her pocket. "Yes, I do. He's still my brother." The helicopter landed in the south pasture, its downdraft bending the grass in waves. Thomas Montgomery emerged like a corporate warrior in his bespoke suit, every inch the polished CEO. But Elizabeth saw what others missed, the slight tremor in his hands, the darkness under his eyes. Her brother was afraid. "Quite the operation." "You're running, Lizzie?" Thomas's voice carried across the farmyard as he approached, threading between FBI vehicles. "Father would be impressed, though perhaps not by your choice of allies." His gaze swept dismissively over Jack and Emma. "Father taught us both about allies," Elizabeth replied, moving to meet him. "About loyalty, about family. I wonder what he'd think of how well those lessons took." Something flickered in Thomas's eyes. Pain, regret, or maybe just calculation. "You don't understand what you've done. The people involved, the power you're challenging." "I understand perfectly." Elizabeth's voice hardened. "I understand that you helped kill our father, that you were willing to kill me. All for what? Peterson's blood money?" "It wasn't like that." For a moment, her brother's corporate mask cracked. "Peterson had evidence. Things father had done in the early days. He would have destroyed everything we built." "So you destroyed it first?" Elizabeth pulled out the childhood photo, held it up like an accusation. "The brother in this picture would have fought back, would have protected his family." Thomas stared at the photo, and for a heartbeat, Elizabeth saw that boy again, the one who had taught her to ride, who had chased away schoolyard bullies, who had promised to always keep her safe. "I tried to protect you," he whispered. "The car, it wasn't supposed to be like that. Peterson's men went too far. I tried to call it off, but you were in too deep." Jack's quiet voice carried judgment without mercy. "So you let them hunt your sister, let them threaten my family." Thomas's face hardened again. "Family? You've known her for 3 months. I've spent a lifetime being afraid." Emma's clear voice cut through the tension. She stood on the porch, holding something in her hands. "That's what Mom always said about bullies. They make you afraid, and fear makes you forget who you really are." She walked down the steps, approaching Thomas with the simple courage of youth. In her hands was an old tablet, one of Sarah's treasures. "I found the truth about Elizabeth's father, about what really happened that night." Thomas went very still. "What are you talking about?" Emma held up the tablet. "Mom was a forensic accountant before she got sick. She had friends at the FBI. She was helping investigate Peterson, keeping records, until her cancer got bad." Elizabeth's heart stopped. "Sarah was working with father." Jack moved closer, his presence solid and steady. "She never told me the details. Said it was safer that way, but she kept everything encrypted on her tablet. Emma figured out the password last night. Montgomery Industries," Emma said softly. "The password was Montgomery Industries. Mom knew someday someone would need the truth." Thomas swayed slightly, his expensive shoes shifting in the Montana dirt. "Let me see." "No." Elizabeth stepped between him and Emma. "You lost that right when you chose Peterson over family. The FBI has everything now. Father's evidence, Sarah's records, all of it. It's over, Thomas. It's never over, Lizzie." But her brother's voice had lost its edge. He looked around the farm, taking in the FBI presence, the watching neighbors, the quiet strength of the family his sister had found. "What happens now? Now you have a choice." Elizabeth gentled her voice, remembering the boy in the photograph. "Help us make it right. Tell the truth. Be the brother I remember." The silence stretched between them, weighted with decades of love and betrayal. Emma still held Sarah's tablet, its screen glowing with secrets too long buried. Jack stood ready, protective but not threatening. And Elizabeth waited, watching her brother wage his final battle, not with her, but with himself. The morning sun broke through the clouds, painting the farmyard in shades of redemption. Thomas Montgomery looked at his sister, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. What he saw there, strength, forgiveness, family, seemed to reach past his careful walls. "Father always said you were the strong one," he said finally. "I never understood until now." Elizabeth held out her hand, offering not just forgiveness, but a chance to remember who he had been in that childhood photograph. "Then help me be strong. Enough to fix this. Together." The helicopter's rotors slowly stilled in the morning calm. Somewhere in the house, a coffee maker gurgled to life, and on a small Montana farm, surrounded by the unlikely family she had found, Elizabeth Montgomery watched her brother take the first step toward becoming whole again. The trust fund documents spread across the farmhouse kitchen table told a story in dollars and cents, each page annotated in Sarah's precise handwriting. Elizabeth marveled at how the dead could still speak, her father through his hidden evidence, Jack's wife through her meticulous investigation. Now those voices would help bring down an empire built on lies. Peterson's board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Thomas said, his tie loosened, suit jacket draped over a kitchen chair. He looked oddly at home in the rustic setting, as if the farmhouse itself was helping him shed his corporate armor. He'll try to consolidate control before the FBI can freeze the remaining assets. He'll fail. Elizabeth traced Sarah's notes with gentle fingers, because he doesn't know about Mother's trust fund stipulations. Jack looked up from cleaning his service weapon, a habit he'd maintained even after leaving the Rangers. Care. To explain for those of us who don't speak corporate. Emma, curled in Sarah's old reading chair with the tablet, answered before Elizabeth could. Mom found it. When Peterson's company merged with Montgomery Industries, Mrs. Montgomery's trust fund had a special clause. If any criminal activity was proven, control reverts to the Montgomery children, but only if they act together. Thomas's hands shook slightly as he reached for his coffee. Father knew. All this time he knew Peterson would try something like this. That's why he kept pushing us to work together, to maintain joint control. And that's why they killed him, Elizabeth finished softly. But they didn't know about Sarah's investigation, about the evidence she was gathering, even while she was sick. Jack's voice was gentle. Sarah always said documents were like seeds. Plant them right, and truth grows even after you're gone. The FBI agent stationed outside did another perimeter check, his flashlight beam cutting through the gathering dusk. They had insisted on protection after Thomas's private security detail confirmed Peterson had gone off-grid, abandoning his usual protocols. He'll come here, Thomas said, stating what they all knew. When he realizes what we have, that we can prove everything, now he'll try to end it personally. It's his pattern. Let him come. Jack checked his weapon one final time before securing it. He'll find more than corporate raiders waiting this time. Elizabeth watched him move through the kitchen with tactical precision, checking sight lines and access points. In the past week, the farm's defense had been quietly reinforced, not just by FBI agents, but by neighbors who remembered Sarah's kindness, who had seen Elizabeth work their fields, who understood that some fights belonged to everyone. The trust fund documents are only part of it, Emma said, still scrolling through her mother's tablet. Mom mapped everything, money trails, shell companies, even Peterson's pattern of targeting family farms for hostile takeovers. She called it corporate terrorism. Thomas stood, moving to study the satellite map of the valley Jack had pinned to the wall. Peterson's used to urban warfare, boardrooms, back alleys, places he can control. He doesn't understand rural communities. No, Jack agreed, a slight smile touching his lips. He doesn't. Bill Harrison's got every farmer within 50 miles on alert. Try sneaking past people who track elk herds and mountain lions for fun. Elizabeth felt the pieces falling into place. Corporate strategy merging with rural tactical knowledge. Two worlds finally working in harmony. Tomorrow morning, Peterson thinks he's walking into a board meeting to seize control. Instead, Thomas finished, he walks into a trap. The FBI takes down his network, the trust fund clause strips his access to Montgomery resources, and any attempt at retaliation runs straight into a community that protects its own, Jack concluded. He moved to stand behind Elizabeth's chair, his presence solid and comforting. Question is, are you ready for what comes after? Running a company this size, rebuilding what Peterson tried to destroy? Elizabeth reached up to cover his hand with hers, while her other hand found Thomas's arm. Not running, leading. The way Father taught us. The way Sarah showed us, by remembering that behind every spreadsheet and quarterly report are real people, real communities. Like this one, Emma said softly, looking around the kitchen that had become the command center for their resistance. Mom would be proud of all of us. The night deepened outside, but the farmhouse glowed with warmth and purpose. Elizabeth studied the trust fund documents one last time, seeing not just legal language, but a legacy of love. From her mother's financial foresight, to Sarah's quiet investigation, to her father's final lessons about family and duty. Get some rest, Jack advised, ever the tactical commander. Tomorrow we remind Peterson that some things are stronger than money. Some things you can't buy or bully or break. Family, Thomas said, as if testing the word's weight. Community, Emma added, wise beyond her years. Love, Elizabeth finished, holding Jack's gaze. Together they had built something Peterson couldn't understand, a fortress made not of concrete and steel, but of trust and truth and ties that ran deeper than blood. Tomorrow would bring its battles, but tonight, in this kitchen that had seen so much healing, they were simply family preparing to defend their own. The security footage played across multiple screens in the barn's hidden office, each camera capturing a different angle of Peterson's arrival. He came just before dawn, as they'd predicted, but not in the expected convoy of black SUVs. Instead, he walked up the farm's main drive alone, his Italian shoes gathering dust, his tailored suit stark against the pastoral backdrop. "Arrogant bastard," Thomas muttered, watching his former mentor approach. "He thinks he can still control this." "No," Elizabeth corrected, studying Peterson's face on the monitors. "He knows he's lost. This is about revenge now." Jack's voice crackled over their radio. "Remember the plan. Let him think he's got the upper hand. Emma, you stay in the safe room no matter what you hear." "I know, Dad." Their daughter's voice was steady. "Mrs. Harrison is here with me. We're monitoring all frequencies." Elizabeth touched the screen where Peterson's image walked closer, remembering board meetings and charity galas, all the times she'd seen him standing beside her father, all the times he'd smiled while plotting their destruction. "He's carrying," Thomas noted, "left shoulder holster." "Expected that," Jack replied. "Bill's people are in position. FBI's holding back unless things go south." "Elizabeth?" She straightened, smoothing her shirt, one of Sarah's old flannels worn soft with time and love. "Ready?" The farmhouse door stood open in morning stillness. Peterson mounted the porch steps, his footfalls heavy with purpose. Elizabeth met him in the kitchen, where so many of their plans had been laid. "I have to admire the theatricality," Peterson said by way of greeting. The prodigal daughter hiding on a farm of all places. Very dramatic. "Hello, Robert." Elizabeth kept her voice calm, using his first name deliberately. "Would you like some coffee? Sarah's old percolator still makes the best cup in the valley." The casual mention of Sarah's name hit home, a flicker of unease crossing Peterson's face. "Where's Thomas? My sources say he's turned traitor." "Brother." Thomas emerged from the pantry, disheveled but dignified. "She prefers come to his senses." Peterson's hand twitched toward his shoulder. "The mighty Montgomery siblings united. At last, your father would be so proud. Before you killed him. That's not going to work anymore." Elizabeth poured coffee into Sarah's favorite mugs, the domestic action at odds with the tension. "We know what really happened, all of it. Sarah Winters left quite a paper trail. The farmer's dead wife." Peterson laughed, but there was an edge to it. What could she possibly have known? Thomas moved to stand beside his sister. "Everything. Every shell company, every forged document, every accident that cleared your path. She was working with father before you killed him. And now everyone else knows too," Elizabeth added. "The FBI has Sarah's records, father's evidence, the trust fund documents. It's over, Robert. Montgomery Industries is returning to what it should have been. A force for building communities, not destroying them." Peterson's smile turned cruel. "You really think your little farming friends and federal watchdogs can stop what's coming? I built this empire. I own judges, senators. But you don't own this land." Jack's voice carried from the doorway. He stood relaxed but ready, every inch the special operations veteran. "And you don't know much about rural communities." The farmer plays hero. Peterson's hand moved toward his holster. "Stay out of this. It's beyond your comprehension." "See, that's your mistake." Jack nodded slightly, a signal to unseen allies. "Thinking you're the biggest predator in these hills." The morning erupted with coordinated precision. Bill Harrison's rifle cracked from his hiding spot, sending Peterson's gun spinning. Linda's horse trailer blocked the road behind him. Farmers emerged from the pre-dawn shadows, carrying the quiet authority of people who worked the land. "Community watch," Jack explained mildly. "We take care of our own." Peterson's mask finally cracked, showing the desperation beneath. "You think this changes anything? I still have contacts, resources." "No, you don't." Emma's voice came through. The kitchen radio. Mum's files just went live. Every news outlet, every regulatory agency, every law enforcement database. It's trending worldwide. Elizabeth saw the moment Peterson realized the truth. He was finished, not by corporate maneuvering or legal strategy, but by the quiet determination of a dying woman who had seen through his facade years ago. "It's funny," Thomas said, watching his former mentors collapse. "You taught us that power comes from controlling others, but real power, it comes from protecting what matters. Family," Elizabeth added softly. "Community. Love. Everything you tried to destroy. FBI." Vehicles pulled into the farm's drive, summoned by some silent signal. Peterson's shoulders sagged, his expensive suit now dusty and defeated. As agents approached with warrants and handcuffs, he turned one last time to Elizabeth. "Your father said you were too soft for this world," he spat. "Too willing to trust." "No." Elizabeth felt Jack's hand slip into hers, felt Thomas's shoulder brush her own. "He taught me to trust the right people, to build something worth fighting for." The sun crested the mountain ridge as Peterson was led away, painting the farm in hues of victory and vindication. Neighbors emerged from their posts. Emma ran to hug her father, and in the golden morning light, Elizabeth finally felt the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. Sarah's security cameras kept their vigilant watch, recording the moment a community's strength overcame corporate greed, recording the moment a family, pieced together from love and trust and shared purpose, stood undefeated in the morning sun. A packet of morning glory seeds lay on the farmhouse windowsill, waiting for spring planting. Elizabeth touched the paper envelope gently, remembering Sarah's garden journal entry about them. Morning glories remind us that beauty can climb out of darkness, that each dawn brings new beginnings. 2 weeks had passed since Peterson's arrest. The FBI had cleared out, the media circus had moved on, and the farm was settling back into its rhythms, though nothing was quite the same. Rather like the garden soil after winter, everything had been turned over, made ready for new growth. "The board approved the restructuring plan," Thomas said, looking up from his laptop at the kitchen table. He'd shed his corporate uniform for jeans and a flannel shirt, looking more like their father than ever. "Montgomery Industries' agricultural division will be headquartered here in the valley. Local oversight, community-based decision-making." Sarah would have appreciated the irony, Jack remarked, passing Elizabeth a cup of coffee. "Corporate giant brought to heel by small-town values." Emma burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement. "The first lavender shoots are coming up, and Mrs. Harrison says we can expand the herb garden into her south field. She wants to start a local cooperative." Elizabeth shared a smile with Jack. Linda Harrison, once so concerned with social climbing, had become one of their strongest allies in rebuilding the community Peterson had tried to destroy. "Speaking of cooperation," Thomas began, then hesitated. "The trust fund, Father's final failsafe. It requires both of us to manage the company. I thought maybe, if you wanted to run things from here, a corporate headquarters on a working farm." Elizabeth pretended to consider it. "Could be interesting, as long as the CEO doesn't mind getting her hands dirty." Jack's arm slipped around her waist, warm and secure. "Dirty hands mean honest work." Something else Sarah used to say. The morning sun streamed through windows Emma had washed yesterday, catching dust motes and possibilities in its light. On the wall, Sarah's old garden calendar showed the phases of the moon, her neat handwriting marking planting dates that would still be followed, her wisdom still guiding them. "The Peterson trial starts next month," Thomas said quietly. "They'll need us both to testify. We'll be ready." Elizabeth reached for her brother's hand across the table. "Together this time." Emma set a fresh plate of only slightly burnt cookies between them. Her baking was improving with practice. "Does this mean you're staying, both of you, for good?" The in question hung in the air, weighted with hope. Elizabeth looked around the kitchen, where she'd first learned to trust again, at the family she'd found, and the brother she'd recovered. "Well," she said carefully, "the morning glories need planting, and someone has to keep your father from fixing fences crooked." "Hey now," Jack protested, but his eyes crinkled with happiness. Thomas cleared his throat. I might have bought the old Miller place, the one up the road, if that's okay." Emma launched herself at her uncle, cookies forgotten. "Really, you're staying too?" "Someone has to represent the corporate office," he replied, awkwardly returning her hug. "Besides, I hear this valley grows more than just crops, grows families too." Outside, Bill Harrison's truck rumbled past, heading to the first meeting of the new agricultural cooperative. The morning glories would wait to be planted, their seeds holding the promise of beauty to come, just as Sarah had known they would, just as she had planned even while fighting her final battle, preparing the ground for healing she wouldn't live to see. Elizabeth leaned into Jack's embrace, watching Emma teach Thomas the proper way to dunk cookies in milk. The corporate world still turned. Montgomery Industries still needed guidance, but it would be different now, led from a farmhouse kitchen instead of a boardroom, grounded in the soil that had given her sanctuary. "You know," Jack murmured against her hair, "most people would think it's crazy. Running a corporation from a farm, living with your brother up the road, letting a 12-year-old girl design your community outreach programs. Most people don't understand about morning glories," Elizabeth replied. "How they need both roots and room to climb." Emma looked up from her cookie dunking lesson. "Mom always said crazy was just another word for brave, for trying something new." Thomas nodded slowly. "Father used to say the same thing, right before he taught us something important. Smart people, Jack said softly. Think maybe they knew something we're just figuring out? Elizabeth touched the packet of seeds again, feeling the future shift and settle into place. They knew about planting things, about growing love in unlikely soil. She smiled at her unlikely perfect family. Maybe it's time we did some planting of our own. The marriage license lay on the dresser, its official seal catching the morning light. Elizabeth traced their names, still marveling at how natural they looked together. Elizabeth Montgomery and Jackson Winters. Simple, honest words for a love that had grown from crisis into something as steady as the seasons. Mom, Uncle Thomas is here with the quarterly reports, and Mrs. Harrison wants to know if we're still having the wedding reception in the North Field. Emma's voice carried up the stairs, the word Mom still new enough to make Elizabeth's heart skip. The adoption papers had been finalized last month, another document marking their family's evolution. She found them in the kitchen, her almost teenage daughter arranging fresh herbs for the wedding centerpieces, her brother looking relaxed in his now customary casual attire, and Jack pouring coffee into Sarah's old mugs. The scene was so ordinary, yet so precious. The cooperative's numbers are exceptional, Thomas reported, spreading papers across the table they'd once used to plan. Peterson's downfall. Who knew organic farming could be this profitable? The board's talking about expanding the model to other regions. Sarah knew, Jack said quietly. Found her old business plan in the attic last week. She'd mapped out everything. The cooperative, the community-based management, even the integration with Montgomery Industries. She just ran out of time to see it through. Elizabeth touched the herbs Emma was arranging. Lavender and thyme from Sarah's garden, now expanded across 3 farms. She saw it through us, all of us. The past year had transformed more than just their family. The valley had become a model for rural economic revival, with Montgomery Industries' agricultural division leading the way in sustainable farming practices. Peterson's trial had ended in a conviction, his empire dismantled, his stolen assets returned to the communities he'd tried to destroy. Did you ever imagine? Thomas mused, watching Emma work. That day you pulled Elizabeth from that burning car. That I'd end up with a corporate executive for a wife, a reformed corporate raider for a brother-in-law, and a daughter who can calculate profit margins while breeding heritage herbs? Jack smiled, drawing Elizabeth close. Life's funny that way. Emma looked up from her arrangements. Sarah, she wrote about that too, in her journal. She said love was like her garden. You plant the seeds, but you can't always predict what will grow. The kitchen filled with morning light, turning Emma's herbs into stained glass, catching the tears in Elizabeth's eyes. So much had changed, yet the heart of their home remained the same. This kitchen where they'd planned battles and celebrated victories, where they'd learned to be a family. The FBI called, Thomas mentioned, trying to sound casual. They want us to consult on other cases of corporate land grabs targeting farming communities. Apparently, we are experts now. We. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow at her brother. Thomas shrugged, a gesture so like their father it hurt. Well, I do have some inside knowledge of how these operations work, and a vested interest in stopping them. He glanced around the kitchen, at the life they'd built from the ashes of their old world. Besides, someone has to keep you from going too soft on the corporate raiders. Soft? Jack chuckled. Your sister just negotiated the toughest agricultural labor standards in the country. Made 3 CEOs cry last week alone. Yeah, but she lets Emma's 4-H club use the corporate jet for field trips, Thomas countered. Educational outreach, Elizabeth deadpanned. Very tax-deductible. Emma finished the last centerpiece, stepping back to admire her work. Perfect for tomorrow, simple but elegant, just like Mom Sarah always said a farm wedding should be. The words held no sadness now, just love and remembrance. Sarah's presence lived in every corner of their home, not as a ghost, but as a foundation, the soil from which their blended family had grown. Speaking of the wedding, Jack said, Bill Harrison wants to know if he's still giving the bride away, or if that honor goes to Thomas. Both, Elizabeth decided, watching her brother's face light up. This family's about building bridges, not choosing sides. Thomas cleared his throat. Dad would have liked that. He always said the Montgomery strength was in our unity, not our divisions. He would have loved all of this, Elizabeth agreed. The farm, the cooperative, the way we've merged his business vision with Sarah's community values. He would have loved you, Emma said simply, hugging Elizabeth, just like we do. Outside, wedding preparations were underway. The North Field, where they'd once fought Peterson's men, now held tables and chairs. Fairy lights strung between posts like stars caught in nets. Tomorrow, under Montana's vast sky, they would make official what their hearts had known for months. that love, like morning glories, could bloom in the most unexpected places. Elizabeth Montgomery Winters stood in her farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by the family she'd found and the brother she'd recovered, breathing in the scent of herbs and coffee and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to defend what they'd built. But today, in this moment, she was exactly where she was meant to be, home. The family portrait hung in the farmhouse kitchen, capturing a moment 5 years after the wedding. Elizabeth and Jack stood center, their love evident in the way they leaned toward each other. Emma, now 17, held her 4-H championship ribbon, surrounded by the herbs she'd made famous throughout the valley. Thomas sat on the porch steps beside them, his corporate polish softened by years of country living, a genuine smile replacing his old boardroom mask. But it was the background that told the real story. Sarah's garden expanded into acres of organic herbs, the cooperative's processing barn gleaming with solar panels, and the Montgomery Winters Agricultural Institute rising from restored farmland. The institute, Emma's idea, had become a beacon for communities fighting corporate land grabs, a place where business expertise met rural wisdom. They still called it the farm, where love grew from ashes, where a burning car brought together two worlds, where morning glories climbed toward heaven every spring, carrying Sarah's legacy in their blooms. And in the valley, they still told the story of how a corporate heiress and a farmer proved that the strongest foundations are built not with money or power, but with trust, truth, and the courage to choose love. In Sarah's garden, beneath the Montana sky, her final journal entry had become their family motto, etched in stone. Plant hope, nurture love, trust in tomorrow's bloom.